Part 2 of End of the Line. I watched as the revelation unfolded that this entire cluster of homes and shops was a series of death traps. Explosives, both magical and mundane, were set, and any triggered bolts or darts were laced with poison or acid. Judging by the downed Kinku soldiers' initial spasms and abrupt paralysis, the bolts appeared to be laced with wyvern venom. Vaughn was not a physician, but a paladin. She managed to neutralize the poison, but the Kinku remained unconscious from his injuries. The arrow-riddled woodpile revealed an elaborate crossbow trap resting on a hunter's stand with a drop feed. The dwarf named Ironreach moved to claim it. "Careful, it has runes on it," the one named Zim said as he looked around. "Do you smell that?" "Yes, it's just whiskey," Ironreach said as he picked up the crossbow and immediately triggered a fire rune. Initially it seemed relatively benign, just a brief jet of sparks sprayed straight upwards like a flare. But a few embers were all that was needed to land in the alcohol that drenched the stand and the keg of gunpowder underneath. Zim and Ironreach were swiftly immolated. As soon as the scoutman Duntrag disappeared around a corner, his throat caught a needle. He quickly extracted it and looked down to reach for a vial in his pocket containing an antidote. Catching a slight movement out of the corner of his left eye towards a pile of corpses, he immediately hurled a knife in the direction of the movement and struck true. As soon as he heard a faint cry, he drew the serrated hatchet at his belt and stalked in that direction. When he got closer, he saw more movement over to his right and whirled around. A hooded figure about 4 feet tall swung a blacksmith's hammer with an underhand swing and hit him full force in his chin. There was an accompanying crunch as his head snapped up and back. He was knocked off his feet by the force of the blow and onto his back, unconscious before he hit the ground. Moments later, a pair of hands tilted his head up and dragged his thrown dagger across his throat once before shoving it through his left eye. I could taste the cloaked person's rage from here. Intrigued, I shifted to the side to watch as they ran into the nearest house. But chance is apt to be inopportune. At this moment, a soul reaper named Exxon Norsk chose this most opportune time to appear a few feet to my right. An Agathion from the Talazo Kingdom resembles an emaciated black-furred mongoose about 2 feet tall, or should I say long, and wears different types of jewelry and clothing accessories based on her needs at the time. Today, it was a metal chain-linked bracelet with empty gem insets that draped around her body like a bandolier. She also has a pair of black raven wings that fold flat underneath her shoulders. Though I have never actually seen her fly, I know she is quite capable of running fairly quickly and effortlessly climbs or slithers up and down vertical surfaces. While there is no formal hierarchy per se, there's a certain way of doing things and directives to be followed in proper sequence for one's duties to be completed before a soul moves on to the next phase of existence. A soul reaper's job is not to collect souls, but to direct them to the locale of its new existence. Once the Morgan determines whether or not they can return to life, or whatever plane or entity should have it based on a lifetime of their actions. As one of the Morgan Soul Reapers, Exxon Narsk is highly regarded by other Soul Reapers, Harbingers, the Morgan's courtyard of blackbirds, and even the Phantom Queen herself. But as someone who prefers to avoid politics and power plays, I have the misfortune of being someone who attracts her attention. Shortly after my first mishap as the Harbinger for the Phantom Queen, Exxon Narsk appointed herself as my monitor, and I gained the dubious distinction of being the only Harbinger with a monitor. The Stonecrow's monitor even became one of Exxon's monikers. But to be fair, I cannot say I was not warned that failures would carry consequences. While I find Exxon Narsk to be an interesting conversationalist, I am not particularly fond of being her hobby. Ever since her self-appointment, I have to deal with her unannounced arrivals, which inexplicably only ever occur when I am engaged in an activity that requires my focused attention. Such poor timing for a diviner of her skill. If she showed up while I'm tracking someone about to die, sometimes she would take over escorting them to wherever they are destined to go. But normally she just accompanies me for the duration. Most of her impromptu visits entail her showing up to ask an unusual question or request that I obtain, or make her an article of clothing or tool suitable for her size and form to use. For instance, the bracelet she is currently wearing is my handiwork, or to simply watch what I am doing at the time. I am working for the Morgan at the moment, Soul Reaper Exxon Narsk. I inform her as soon as I see her. Yes, Madam Harbinger Stormcrow. Sir Regent expressed some concern about your current charges. Regent is another Soul Reaper. He enjoys roughhousing with anyone who is amenable and occasionally takes issue with how slowly I sometimes dispatch the dead. You may tell Regent that most of the valiant warriors are already dispatched to Her Majesty. The ones left here are just scavengers. I remind you, Madam Stormcrow, that it is your role to scavenge the dead, not judge them, Exxon said sternly. I am not judging them, but I am entitled to have opinions and can even act on them. I must be mindful of my station. I say the last sentence in a voice and speech pattern imitating the Morgan. Exxon smiled at my response. Since this is your first massive battle collection, I am here to see if you need any assistance. Show me who is about to die. Your direction of death sense is superior to mine. Nonetheless, I pointed out the human woman, the hobgoblin sergeant, and the remaining platoon members. When the cloaked attackers crossed my line of sight, my own direction of death was triggered, that their death was imminent, and I frowned. But it was hidden by my mask, while the nature of the attacks made it obvious that they were resident of Dunekate. The attack methodology indicated they were a shadow elf, and judging by height, probably a younger one. A pity that girl will die, Exxon remarked in reference to the hooded ambusher, but I didn't reply. Slaughtering the villages wasn't a necessary military objective, and we both knew it. Instead, I watched the hooded attacker in silence as she picked off another one of Reslin's raiders. Her anger had not subsided, but shifted from explosive rage to simmering resentment. I will take this unit to Her Majesty for you and grant their last requests on your behalf, if they have any and are not exorbitant or time-consuming. You are going to have your hands full with that one when you decide to intervene, she said cheerfully. When I decide? I queried as I looked over to her. Yes, when you decide, Madam Stormcrow. Could you be more obtuse with your directive, Exxon? Your subtlety is too obvious. Are you being sarcastic? I know you're inferring that I should stop the shadow elf before she makes a fatal mistake, I replied. She already has, Madam Stormcrow, but it need not be her last day. Over the next half hour, the other soldiers were killed in similar fashion, mostly by triggering multiple traps onto themselves with finishing strikes performed by the mysterious figure. When they expired, Exxon promptly recited a prayer to shrink them into a tiny multifaceted gem and reverently attach each one into an open inset on her bracelet bandolier.